Good morning. Happy Sunday. I'm so glad you're here to watch whatever information I bring in today because, man, it's all over the place, right? So, in this last week, we had this big 14-hour solar flare on Thursday that's still bumping around. And I've been up most nights taking pictures and playing with the northern lights. So, it's been sort of crazy energy all over the place. And I was wondering how you were feeling. So, thank you first for being here. Yesterday I had coffee with a really dear friend, a fellow Pisces, and she's just amazing. And true to nature, this is the kind of stuff I do. we're talking, and I'm like, "Do you have a piece of paper? I want to write this down because this is what I want to talk about tomorrow on Sunday, which is, like self knowledge." And I know I talk about that a lot, but I wanted to sort of dive in a little bit more and explain to you what I mean by self-knowledge and the role that it plays with something like deconditioning, which is really important, right? So I guess the first place to start is knowledge. It's familiarity, right? It's awareness, it's understanding, it's gained through study. We collect information, we collect data, and it has a range of what's perceived, what's discovered, or what's learned. What you learn in a school, what you discover through your own experiences and roles and life, right? And then also what you perceive. Like these are connected. I know that they are. It's a knowing. It's a range of information. And, when we really look at how we are conditioned to learn and what we choose to learn and what is given to us as important through our culture, through our world, then I want to also put deconditioning in there, right? Okay. So, what we do in schools, we get degrees, we get profession, and then we go on to professions and we have these external things that help us out. This is what I'm good at, this is what I know how to do. For me, I'm an educator, right? And I love this deck. This is the Sacred Wealth deck, and it's a mirror on here. So I'm sorry you can't really read it. But this card is called the Communicator, right? Words have power, how to bring concepts and perceptions into words. And this has been my card for a couple of times now. So I really like this idea of being able to communicate and to communicate about what's external, what's the external knowledge that we have, and what's the, how well do we know ourselves? What's our internal knowledge? So, how have we studied our how have we studied energy or energy management? Do we even know what that is, right? So self-knowledge is an accumulation of studies about things like your own energy system, how your nervous system works, how your fight or flight comes in, how your sympathetic and parasympathetic can get activated and how to deactivate it and calm it down, right? um, Tools, environments, and places where you either disconnect and disassociate or you step into presence. This is self knowledge on the energy management side. So, the one that comes up most frequently is this concept of overwhelm. And I've been able to bring the highly sensitive person, the HSP stuff in and deal with overstimulation, emotional reactivity, depth of processing, and sensations like the kind of fabric you have and the smells in the room and whatnot, and bring these into overwhelm. And overwhelm, when we get overwhelmed, we get anxious. And so it sort of weaves itself into the psychology, into parenting, into relationships, right? So we build sound relationships with ourselves and with others when we have self knowledge, when we know how to speak about ourselves in a very educated, um, experienced way, right? And so we also help others in how to deal with us or how to work with us. And so the example I would use is that I love music venues. I love acoustic guitar. I love, for those of you who've been following me, I go to the Whitefish Songwriter Festival. I like that one-on-one small music venue or a very small environment. That does not translate over to I love music and I like concerts because between the people, the size, the parameters, it gets really loud and I get overwhelmed really easy. Explaining what that overwhelm feels like means that my partner and I can start to navigate as to when I'm going to be open and relaxed and it's enjoyable and when I'm managing stress all the time, right? So it helps us advocate methods and skills with other people on how they can relate to us. So self-knowledge isn't just, like, hey, by the way, I have a little bit of information about me, but it's how I can advocate myself to others. And so that goes over to the next part, which is how we teach our children. And I've had conversations with all of my children over the last couple weeks about structures that need to be in place for me, the way that I control things, the way that I put things in patterns because it's soothing to me, right? So that they understand, oh, that's why you did that. So as a parent, it's really important to use that self-knowledge, which is, this is what I know about myself, that when this happens, this is what I do. And then it opens the door for the child to be able to say, like, wow, I noticed that at school, or I noticed that with this person. And so now we're talking about invisible, energetic things that tip us or overwhelm us or activate us, and we're normalizing them. We're normalizing them. So when we normalize energy management, which is, this is energy, this is how it moves around, this is how it affects me, this is what I do when I'm reacted. We identify the invisible. We soothe the systems, right? We soothe our own systems. We go, okay, so this is what's going on. Like Thursday, when that solar storm was just intense for 14 hours, I was, texting and talking with friends, and it's like, what are you doing to take care of yourself right now? And we were all sort of comparing notes, right? Because we could all feel it. When we shift into compulsive patterns and behaviors, when we need to control or bring order to things, or what soothes our system when we have it there, and why? What does that do? Anyone who sees my house knows that it's always in order, and sort of very Montessori-ish. It has a place for everything, and everything goes back in its place, and that provides soothing for my form of overwhelm, right? So what happens is we depersonalize it, which is like, this isn't something that you need to be worried about. This is actually me taking ownership and not blaming other people. So, hey, if you would, then I could. What it does is say, this is what I know about myself, right? So when we decondition ourselves, and decondition is a word we sort of made up, right, on our little thing, right? Is that we learn how to trust ourselves, right? We see the true you. This is all coming from Sacred Rebels, right? I love this. The trust and this, being able to see the true you, to trust that what you feel is also what you know. And then actually, like, what are you feeling? What is it that you're experiencing, right? So when we're talking about deconditioning, what we're doing is we're studying familial traits. Like, oh, that's right. When my mom got uptight, this is what she did. When my dad, was in versions of overwhelm, this is what he did. That makes sense to me. So we're not villainizing. We're sort of gathering information, reactions to systems of coping. Some people have to have those 2 or 3 cocktails at the end of the day. Some people disconnect and check out and read. Some people isolate and aren't very social. Some people, like me, put themselves in the middle of small social gatherings where there's other things to distract. I did that a lot when I had young children, right? So that we can find ways to stay present and not react to conditioned states that existed when we were young and that we carried forward. And we learn how to embody. So when I'm talking about conditioned or deconditioned states, think of Psychology 101 and B.F. Skinner or Pavlov's dog, right? Which is reactions to an object or event, or, in my case, people, places, and things, can be learned and shaped by external factors. You learn that if mom or dad gets a look on their face, you need to change your behavior. You learn that when you pull a certain book out and everyone, chastises you for what you're reading, you learn to sort of hide your reading or not even pursue that in front of people that you love. These are conditioned states that are passed from in family systems down, regarding what's okay in the culture, what's okay in the family system, what's presentable, and then it translates over to, what's it really take to be a unique weirdo in high school, right? Or to own all of that. So when we decondition, we identify the familial, environmental systems that are conditioned into us, and we constantly choose our own reactions. We choose our own responses from the position of choice and sovereignty. So it's where we unwind the unconscious reactions and we pull it all into our knowledge of self, and then we respond accordingly. Which means I understand that you're doing that to trigger me right now, and I'm not taking the bait. So go find something else to do. And when we can parent or when we can be in a relationship like that, it's pretty powerful. So I've created this. I've been doing self-management and talking about Chiron and everything for months now. And I really like laid it all out. And I have a 7-week coaching package, which is all about, energy management and knowledge of self. Especially important right now when Mars goes into Cancer, because it can be a little persnickety and it can also be very self-nurturing. So we want to sort of play with it right now. So if between now and May, middle of May, if you want to take a deep dive into that, by all means, like drop me a message or get over to my website and fill out the contact form. I would love to hear from you. So tips. I have 6 tips. So the first one is to assess how much actual knowledge do you have about yourself? Not others, not your responses or management. Like I know because when my mom does this, or when my husband does this, or when my kid does this, or when my partner does this, right? Um, it's not about others, it's about you. It's about childhood, it's about familial patterns, it's about your energy system, it's about your challenges, it's about your strengths. Assess that. Like how much do I really know? And then be kind to yourself, because it might be 0 or it might be 10% or it might be like, "Hey, I've been studying this for a long time, Denise. Tell me something I don't know," right? Number 2, explore how much you understand energy. Energy is invisible. It's intuitive. It's knowing, right? It's like bringing the conscious in to unconscious behavior, right? And so it's where our senses and our reactivity and our overwhelm and our anxieties and our fears are all like moving, but they're invisible and you can't see them, you can't trace them like you can a car driving down the road, or outfits in your closet, or the way that people's faces look when you talk, right? So explore energy, the invisible parts of energy and where it might come from, right? So that's number 2. Number 3, try tracking energy. Like I like to watch someone come in the door at the coffee shop and they're either really, really happy, and then it sort of ripples into this contagious little bubbling into the coffee shop, or someone can come in and they're kind of curmudgeony and they're like, rah. And you can see the tracks of who it impacts as they go along. So try tracking it, find out where it starts, follow the path. Look at the reactions that are created, follow the moods, the interactions, the breathing, what happens when you're seeing that and you're following it. Is your breathing contracting or is it expanding? What kind of emotions are coming up? How are you managing your emotions, right? And what kind of knowledge do you have on these emotions when they show up? Because it's all invisible again, right? So you're tracking the invisible, and this is where the clairs come in, and this is where our intuition and our observation skills really like take off. Number 4, go find Chiron on your chart. I can't say this enough. Find Chiron on your astrology chart. Find out what house it's in. The house is going to show you what element your particular skill sets for doing all of this tracking energy is going to be, and reacting to energy. It might be in the mental field, thinking, air. It might be in the physical, earth, things that you can touch, the 3D. Might be in the emotional arena, which is energy and energy and motions and our feelings, or it might be in the spiritual, which is fire, momentum. You're going to find that there's one of those that over and over and over again can just like tip you. And then also once you manage it, can take you into your mastery as a communicator about that, right? So when you find your Chiron and you track your energy, you can also find out what your gifts are. which is what I love the most. It's like, oh, this isn't just something I'm really good at. This is something I'm very good at. And, I know that my Chiron's in emotions, which is invisible energy. So this energy management piece has just been blossoming out of me and my work and sort of like curious, like, hey, how can I help you? What can we do with this? Because this is what excites me, right? Number 5, collaborate, learn, explore, expand your self-knowledge with others, whether it's get a group on the phone, the phone, the phone. I have all these symbols that are so baby boomer, right? Watch reels, stories, read books, hire a therapist, a coach, get into groups and do weekend groups where there's discussions. A real good friend of mine has started a once a month grief group, and it's phenomenal just to have a place to talk about what happens when we are grieving the loss of something dear to us, right? Get into empowering your self-knowledge on energy, right? And number 6, final, gosh, be compassionate because you're tracking something that's invisible, that is unifying forms of energy around the unknown that is usually ignored or disparaged or not accepted, and yet it is essential. So know that this energy management is like a specialty in the area of the invisibility component of our world, and something that isn't generally understood or even respected. So be compassionate as you start to study this. And again, if you want more information, drop me a message. I'd love to be a support system for you. Also, like or share this, pass this around if you know family systems with sensitive kids, empathic children, empathic parents, a lot of anxiety systems and patterns that are triggering. This is the kind of stuff we want to talk about and we want to bring to the surface. So, you have a wonderful Sunday, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.